Hi. First, I'd like you to ask to introduce yourself a little bit for people that don't know you and just about who you are, what you're doing.
Okay, so my name is Bethune, and I built this very cool boat called Earthrace, and we set a record for a powerboat to circle the globe, and we ran it on biodiesel made from waste cooking oils from restaurants. And then I joined Sea Shepherd for a year and went down to Antarctica, and I bought a boat that was renamed the Addy Gill, and kind of lost the boat down there and went back to Japan for a bit, and now I work on marine conservation.
Cool. Thank you. Is your general focus oceans, or do you have other passions around environment as well?
In terms of my work, 90% of it is related to marine conservation. There's a small growing element which is related to preservation of wildlife on land, but my main focus is marine conservation. And the reason for that is there's very few people are doing it. You know, if you look at what happens, let's say there's a big forest and someone cuts down an old growth tree, there's evidence that remains, and it's very easy for people to get up in arms over it. Once you get out into the oceans, there's very few people looking after what is, 2/3 of the globe. And so I think I can add the most value there.
That's great. Yeah. So you had your experience in Japan, which has been unpleasant, but at the same time also gave you a lot of insight about certain things in your life. And if I have it correct, you got back on your feet with your new organization, Earthrace, in about 11 months. Is that right?
Yeah, when I got out of Japan, when I was in Japan, I spent quite a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do, and at that stage marine conservation had gotten into my blood, and I knew that was where my future lay, and that was what I wanted to do. And it took me about a year to really get clear in my head what I was going to do, and so effectively I've formed this a new organisation called Earthrace Conservation. And then within that, I've got this small team of ex-special forces, so a bunch of Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Marine Recon type guys, and so we've just started taking on some very hard targets in marine conservation. And then I've got these chapters in different countries around the world that focus on local marine conservation issues. So maybe something like shark finning or seals that happens in the area, maybe local whaling in terms of the Faroe Islands, for example. Plastics on their beaches, just trying to have these chapters that take ownership of local conservation issues.
Yeah. And how did you get back on your feet in that time after your break with Sea Shepherd? And
when I got out of Japan, I was pretty screwed up. I spent about 5 months in max security and on a communications ban, so I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone aside from my lawyers. And towards the end, there was a couple of journalists that would come in, but it was only a maximum of 9 minutes a day, and it did mess me up mentally. And when I got out, it took me a while to kind of come right, I think. And I just sort of slowly had this idea of, I wanted to do marine conservation, but I needed to enlist some supporters, and so I've got now a decent network of people in the US who help fund my work. And the chapters around the world, they all help support me and with the things that we're doing, and probably it was about a year before we kind of really started to get some traction and started running a few missions and having some successes.
Are there any experiences of yourself that you would really like to share about all the many experiences that you've had over the years?
Experiences I'd like to share. I guess one of the things that happened with me when I got out of Japan, I started getting some calls from what I consider just randoms, like people might call me from Guatemala or from Ivory Coast or somewhere around the world, and I started to see this pattern over illegal fishing by foreign vessels. And that's a lot of my work now is focused on that. And in terms of the offenders in this, principally it's Chinese boats that go and fish illegally in the territorial waters of what in most cases are very poor countries, and especially Africa. And so I got a sponsor together, went over to Africa and spent quite a bit of time there. And it breaks your heart to see what's happening to these places. You know, these are very poor countries. They wouldn't have $100 to spend on fisheries enforcement, and so they're easy pickings for these Chinese vessels to come in and clean them out. And to give you an idea of the numbers, a single trawler will take the equivalent of 1,000 artisanal fishermen. And so it's having a big impact on Africa. And these are desperately poor countries, and they are the places that can least afford to have their fish taken from them. And that's a big chunk of my work now, is effectively trying to defend those fisheries for local people. There's so many issues in marine conservation that you can go and target. You know, whaling and seal clubbing and shark finning and illegal long lining and trawling and these things. But for me, the good thing about tackling especially the Chinese, it is illegal. It's easy to tell who the good guys and the bad guys are. Like if there's an industrial vessel in one of these countries, generally it's illegal. And so they make good targets for us, and you need a pretty hardcore team to take them on. And you know, we've started to have some successes there, and you know, it's a good challenge, and it's a fight worth having too. Yeah, I guess other stories. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of them. There's a good friend of mine. She works on the plastics in the oceans, and she's got this picture that had 60,000 plastic bags that was fished out of the water. And she does this talk, and she asked the audience, so how long would it take for these 60,000 bags to be consumed in America? And these people saying, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever, 5 seconds. 60,000 bags every 5 seconds. And these are all through the Pacific now. And what's happening is the way we're treating the planet is starting to bite us in the arse. And what's happening with these plastics is you get these plastic molecules that end up in the ocean just through wind, takes bags out, and polystyrene, all this stuff. And there's a thing called photodegradation. So light breaks them down into smaller particles. Now there's these other chemicals that man makes called persistent organic pollutants. And these repel water, but they love anything organic or seemingly organic. Now plastics are very close to an organic molecule. It's got a long carbon chain. So these persistent organic pollutants latch onto these plastic molecules. Then in what's called the North Pacific Gyre, which is a big whirlpool that is filled with these plastics. And we went through there 4 times on Earthrace. And you scoop out a cup of water. So you scoop out a cup of water, and it's got all these tiny grains in it. And this thing is the size of Texas, like it is enormous. And so you get these small fish that are called filter feeders, and they just feed on anything. They don't care, they can't differentiate what's plastic from organic life. So they start feeding on it, then big fish eat them, and bigger fish and bigger fish. And we then go eating the bigger fish. And this is why now you're starting to see reluctance to eat the old tuna, so the big yellow fin and the blue fin that live for a long, long time. And these persistent organic pollutants, they're entering the food chain, and we're like the top predator in the food chain. You're seeing it now in the whales, like the whales, especially the northern Pacific, are starting to get high levels of chemicals. And like it's really complex, and it's, you know,
we don't see it.
We go and buy a plastic bag, we think it's okay, and it's not okay. But the trouble is, at the moment, very few people understand this. And it's, you know, when you start looking at marine conservation, man, there's 1,000 battles to be had. Which ones do you choose? You know, and thankfully there's, you know, people taking on the plastics industry, but it's part of our culture. We all like using plastic bags. How do you change your culture? And especially somewhere like America, which has 300 million people, of which 290 consume, you know, 5 bags a day, for example. And you know, it's quite daunting when you start working in the oceans. You realise it's much more complex than just going out and trying to save whales or seals or something like that. There's all these other things that are coming in and affecting it. And you know, my little team, we're focusing on one little area. Thankfully, there's a whole lot of other groups focusing on other areas as well. But man, we've got a lot of work to do.
is there anything that society can do, like just people like, who watch this interview, people like me that are not out there doing the tough work, but just still, what can they do?
There's many things people can do. The first thing is to be aware. Be aware of what's going on. So, for example, join a Facebook page. It could be Earthrace Conservation or Shark Savers or any of the organisations doing good work. Yeah. Get on their Facebook page and share the items that come out. And there's many things that come across your desk that are causes worth supporting. And it might be, for example, in New Zealand here, we've got this guy who went and clubbed 23 seals to death down in Nelson. And his court case is coming up. A petition has been started. I think it has 8,000 signatures already. Put your signature on the petition. It's an online petition. And when you turn up at a court, you turn up with 500 signatures, and it's like, well, that's okay. You turn up with 20,000, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, gee, this guy's got 20,000 signatures from all over the world. It starts to have an impact. So share the stories that come across and share the awareness. Become aware of what's happening. Spread that knowledge. Maybe become a volunteer. Yeah. Lots of organisations will take volunteers that on campaigns or on missions or for organising local rallies and that type of thing. Just get involved in the conservation efforts. Maybe help in beach cleanups. Yeah. We did a beach cleanup down in Christchurch a while ago, and we had about maybe 20 people turned up, but it'd be much better to have 100. Much better to have 100, and it's a good thing now. Like people are starting to understand that the journey we are on this planet is a journey of self-destruction, and we need to sort our shit out. And it starts with people becoming aware. And from there, you got options.
For your own organisation, what you're going to do next? What's your next mission?
At the moment, I've got my small team of special forces, and we've got a campaign coming up in Africa, and that is principally focused on illegal fishing by foreign vessels in territorial waters. Okay. Some other campaigns that the rest of the organisation is working on. There's the anti-shark finning campaign in several countries. We've been involved a little bit with the seal clubbing in Namibia. And we've also got there's a TV show around some of our missions that will help to sort of highlight these issues, and that covers from shark finning, illegal trawling, the seal clubbing in Namibia. Maybe one episode to do with some whaling happening in Europe. So you were pretty busy, and lots to do.
So how would you like to see the future in, say, about between 3 to 5 years? What would you like to have seen changed, not only through your missions, but just in general in the marine conservation world?
In marine conservation, the changes I'd like to see, the firstly would be countries taking ownership of their fishery and marine resources. At the moment, there's a real focus on the equivalent of your Ministry of Fisheries around the world in various countries. They simply look at fisheries as a resource to be harnessed, rather than looking at it, how can we preserve this fishery and how can we ensure that it's sustainable, and we look after the creatures that might be vulnerable or that might be endangered. At the moment, it's just simply based on how can we make the most out of this, not how can we preserve this in the best way. And it'd be nice to see that shift happening. And you're starting to see it in some places, but an example of that would be the protection of sharks. There is some real momentum building around protecting sharks in many, many countries. And to give you, one example, Costa Rica just passed, what is one of the strongest pieces of legislation over shark finning anywhere. Like, it's illegal to fin sharks, it's illegal to export shark fin, and illegal to import it. Lots of countries kind of are dabbling in the legislation over sharks, but it's good to see some countries showing some leadership and putting in some real solid legislation that does protect them. And I guess it would be good to see societies taking ownership of the marine conservation. I think it's already happened in a lot of areas of land conservation. So, for example, in Australia, there's been this big issue over the logging of their old growth forests. And it's been happening there for 20 years. And now it's kind of getting to the stage where people are quite accepting that, hey, we should be preserving these forests. It'd be nice to see that transition happen in the oceans, where countries start to take ownership of their fisheries, They protect the species that are vulnerable, and as an example in New Zealand, 55 Maui dolphin left. And you know, we've still got this stupid provision that allows set nets well into the territory that these dolphin inhabit. And the government, it does see this if they do ban trawling and set nets from the domain these dolphin go in, there is an economic cost, and the government currently sees that as too high. But what's the species worth? You know, the Maui dolphin will go extinct probably in the next 10 to 20 years. And the decision that led to that is successive decisions by governments, but especially the one they've just made, which continues to allow set nets and trawlers well within their domain. Nice to see an end to that. And in terms of marine conservation, there will always be battles. Always be battles. The best we can hope for is we win a few of them along the way and we move on to new targets. So let's say we lose the Maoris, maybe that convinces the government to enact decent protection for the Hector's dolphin that face a similar issue. Once you've solved that, then you move on to something else and something else. And there's multiple battles going on at once, but it's nice to see you win a few battles along the way.
Yeah, connecting to the dolphins and other species, are there also products related to these species not to buy, for example? Because
a lot of
relate to products or...
Yeah, a lot of the products end up in Asia. So, for example, manta rays and mabula rays are targeted all over the globe now for their gills. And some mad Chinaman came up with this idea that eating crushed up mabula ray gills will lower their blood pressure. And now manta rays are under threat all over the world because of it. You've got the shark fin soup. You know, it's not an aphrodisiac or anything, it just tastes nice in soup apparently. And that's put enormous pressure on shark populations all over the world. You know, like a rhino horn, for goodness sake, you know, apparently it gives men sniffies all night if you're Chinese. And so rhinoceros are being targeted at unbelievable numbers in Africa. So they can cut this piece of what is effectively fingernail and send it back to China, and it gets used in some little potion for sexually dysfunctional men. Like it's crazy. So there are lots of things you shouldn't be buying. It is good that people, if they're going to eat seafood, that they do think about where it's from. And there's lots of seafood that we shouldn't be touching. There's a big issue over prawn. You know, the prawn fisheries are not good. The prawn farms aren't great. Salmon farms aren't great. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we think is sustainable, but there's a heavier cost downstream from the farms that are set up. So it's good to see people thinking about where their food is from, become aware of where it's from, and focus on having, if you're going to eat seafood, make sure it's sustainably managed.
Is that labelled, or how can they find out about it?
It depends on the country, but if you take Britain, for example, they have there the list, and it classifies their fish from red to green, depending on the level of sustainability of it. They have similar things in North America. There's a New Zealand Good Fish Guide that comes out. So, you know, become aware of, you know, what's in your country.
Do some research. Which species do you focus on around Africa at the moment to protect? Or?
There's several species we focus on. The vessels a ways offshore tend to be targeting pelagics, and within that is mostly it's tuna. And so there's the yellowfin, albacore, skipjack. And around those tuna, they also end up taking marlin and many other things. But they are targeting the tuna fishery. And then the inshore fishery is a whole range of things, from groper and snapper type fish, lots of reef fish, the sharks. For us, it's the vessels we're targeting rather than the species. So if they're an illegal fishing vessel in African waters, they're a fair target for us to go after. And shark finning is very prevalent in Africa. What's kind of happening at the moment, you're starting to see countries like Costa Rica and America, it is becoming harder to get fin from there. And so there is going to be a shift in shark finning to the underdeveloped and less developed countries where they don't have legislation to protect sharks. And I think we will start to see an increase in shark finning in Africa over the next few years, as countries like, hopefully, New Zealand, Australia and US ban the shark fishing trade. This is a game that changes all the time. And, you know, you look at it today and you say, hey, we're going to target this, this and this. come back in 2 years and ask me the same question, and I think the targets will have moved a bit.
Hopefully. And do you work with a large team, or do you have a small team to go out and see? And what kind of people are coming along?
My team tends to be pretty small.
Yeah.
I find it's not easy to manage a big organisation. Like I look at someone like Greenpeace. How do they manage all those tens of thousands of volunteers? It's not easy. I find I work better in a very small team where I can be very selective in the people that come into the team, and especially so in what I would consider like my tactical unit. Effectively it's 7 guys out of the special forces, and then some other people in terms of operations and PR and comms and that. So it's a very small team. The chapters, a typical chapter might only be 10 people, 15 people, something like that. But sort of get out there and make a difference in your own little piece of the world and do your best.
Yeah. Is it a dynamic team? Do the people change, or is there some that really stay with you?
Yeah, the teams do evolve a little bit. At the start, you get a lot of people come along and want to be part of your team, and then they start to realise there's a lot of hard work involved, and then and so some drop by the wayside. And when I first started the team, I think there were some people involved who, maybe their heart's in the right place, but less suited to the culture that we have in the team. Like, we're a very decentralised organisation, and I tend to have, chapters do their own thing. I'm not going to come in and start telling them I want you to work on this or that or the other thing. It's up to them to take ownership of their region and come up with missions or campaigns or things that they want to go working on. And so the team's always evolving, and the culture within the team is kind of gradually changing, and it is gradually getting in a better and better space, I reckon.
That's good. It's just a growing organisation, I guess, so it always takes a bit of time.
Look, I think what will happen in the organisation is, and at the moment we're still laying foundations. Like, we've got about 8 or 10 countries that we've got chapters in, and we're just laying these foundations, and it will change for us when the TV show comes out. If you look at Sea Shepherd, it was a relatively unknown brand until Whale Wars, and then Whale Wars just shot them through the roof. And I have no ambition to become big like Sea Shepherd, but the increased profile will help us enormously, and especially in raising these issues like shark finning and illegal fishing in Africa. A TV show is a very powerful enabler, and it remains the most effective way to communicate messages to people, albeit not perfect.
Media. Could you share some successes that you've booked, just all over your career, that are just motivating and encouraging?
We got asked to go and help in Trinidad and Tobago, where they had legislation that allowed for the hunting of turtles, and turtles are endangered around the globe. In the Caribbean, there's still around 10 countries, I believe, that are still hunting turtles today. And what happens, turtles are pelagics, they move around. And so no real country can claim ownership of a turtle species. So I went to Trinidad, met with their Minister of Fisheries and their Minister for Tourism, and I basically laid it out. And I bluffed them, and I said, we are going to make a TV episode about Trinidad and Tobago and the way you guys hunt turtles. And the previous day, we'd purchased about a 110-pound turtle off this fisherman. And we had it sitting in the back of this four-wheel drive, laying on its back, which is the way the locals go treating these turtles. Halfway through this meeting, it wasn't going anywhere. And there's about 10 officials in this meeting. And I said, I want you to come downstairs and look at this turtle that I've got with me. And one of the ladies said, oh, that'll be interesting. Yeah, let's go and have a look at this turtle. We went down, and this group huddles around the back of this four-wheel drive. They look at this turtle, and the turtle kind of woke up, and it lifted its head up, and you saw this pussy eye looking at 4 or 5 of this group, and you could see it just looked at them, and then it just closed its eye, and it just went, and its head clunked back on the deck, and this lady was like, oh my God. And she turns to me and she says, how many of these is getting killed every day? And I said, look, we don't know, but maybe it's 50 to 70 a day, something like that. And the group went away, had a meeting, came back and said, oh, we should go upstairs and finish this off. So I went back upstairs, and the minister basically then he said, I commit to you, I will change this law this year. And the law was passed November last year. And it wasn't solely because of what I did, but I think I helped to cement in a lot of work that a local group, Trini Eco Warriors, had been working on, and I was able to cut through all the bullshit and get in to meet the two ministers that this affected. And in some ways it was a threat. Like I said, look, we're going to expose this on national TV. And it is a hypocrisy what they'd been doing. Like Trinidad promoted themselves as the turtle capital of the world. And reasonably so. Like they have, the second and third largest leatherback nesting beaches in the world. And, these things are like Sherman tanks coming up your beach. It's an extraordinary sight to see this nesting. Like if you want to go and see the coolest place for turtles on earth, Trinidad and Tobago is one of the top three. But then they're eating them at the same time. Like what a hypocrisy. Yeah. And it needed someone to get in and meet this minister and spell it out. This is a hypocrisy what you are doing. You need to sort your shit out and stop the hunting of these turtles. And it was a good lesson for me. Like often we need to work with governments to be really effective in change. Waving banners and getting people's face and things like that, it has a role to play. But at the end of the day, we still need governments to step up to the plate and change legislation. And then if there's a law in place and those laws get broken, as private individuals, we have a right to try and intervene or try and work on enforcement or force the government to do the enforcement, but it starts with effective legislation. And in Trinidad, I was part of a team that managed to go in and achieve that.
That's great. Yeah, that's really good. I have one more question I've got. This happens all the time, doesn't it? Yeah, when it comes to New Zealand, how can we, again, positively influence even politics and what we're doing ourselves to, preserve the land and the oceans? Do you have any advice?
In New Zealand, there's a couple of things happening at the moment. One is there's an organisation formed called the New Zealand Shark Alliance that is working to stop shark finning in New Zealand. They should get on their website and become a member of that and make a submission to the government. So the government is opening it up to submissions from New Zealanders to get in and comment about it. And they should get in and say, we should ban all trade in shark fins in New Zealand and ban the importation and export of it. There's also an organisation called Legacy, which are working to preserve the local fishing and to stop the encroachment of commercial fishing and large vessels in on the recreational area. And commercial fishing is very destructive, and especially the set nets and trawl nets. So they could join Legacy, and become aware about everything else that's going on. The Mauis, the hectares. We got many issues. The offshore drilling. We're talking about opening up our east coast to offshore oil drilling. Man, I worked in the North Sea on oil rigs out there, and the way they trash the oceans is a disgrace, and I'd hate to see all those practices coming into New Zealand. Lots of battles to be fought here, eh?
Yeah, that is a real threat. Yeah. What I thought would maybe handy to mention is where they can find more about you or your organisation, or organisations that you think that are worth, researching, committing to, whatever.
Okay, so a couple of cool organisations. Certainly Shark Savers do a lot of good work in terms of stopping shark finning and working with organisations. In New Zealand, Forest and Bird do a lot of good work. They could look me up, so Pete Bethune or Earthrace Conservation, just go on Facebook or on our website. The key for people is to find out an organisation in your area and get involved. And it just starts, join a Facebook page, contribute, get to learn some people who maybe have similar views to you and who want to make a difference, and team up with them. Often find individually we don't achieve much, but you partner with some good people, and we've all got the ability to be part of something extraordinary. And I've been lucky to be part of a couple of amazing teams, and You know, the key is don't do it alone. Get with some other people who share your views and make something cool happen.
And one more is about a sketch of how it will end up if we don't make any changes, but also, and I would like to put the focus more on that, how we can manifest, how it can look like when we do make changes and we start collaborating with Earth and seas.
Okay. If you take the Poor Knights as an example, they set up a marine protected area there, and it divided the community in half, and it was very divisive at the time. And today it is one of the most world-class marine protected areas anywhere. And you go out there and it is totally full of life. It's an unbelievably cool dive to go out there and see it. So we can have successes, but you know, I spent a lot of time travelling, you know, every ocean on Earth and many of its seas, and some of the areas in Europe we went to, and it is a barren wilderness. There is nothing there. I remember we went offshore from Portugal out to these rocks. It was about 40 miles offshore, and you would think it would be full of life being that far offshore, and it was barren. It was barren. It was just dead. Saw a couple of eels and some tiny little bait fish, and that was it. They just cleaned it out. And that's the challenge we face. If we don't start sorting our shit out, our oceans will become barren. And we are very dependent on the oceans. You know, so much of our oxygen comes from there, so much of our animal protein comes from there. We destroy the oceans, we are gone. And, you know, I think we have the power to go affecting change, and we can have a positive impact on it, but people got to get off their fat asses and get out and do something.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, we covered quite a lot for my questions. Is there anything you think I missed or that you really like to share or need to mention?
No, I reckon you've done a good job.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think we're good then.
Okay.